Good evening, everybody. Tonight, these are your mana candidates on why they should be standing to get your electoral vote for the next 3 years. But with every election, there's one thing stepping away, and that's your vote. Good evening and welcome to our first It's in the Ballot show for 2023. I'd like to introduce you to my familiar face, Bede Laracy, who is joining me. And so let's sit there and start off here tonight. So these are the candidates' faces you'll see, and one by one we'll peel them and you can find out who's here and who's not. So Gina, would you like to reveal yourself, please? And you've got your microphone down there if you want to say hello.
Kia ora.
Okay. Kush.
Kia ora, welcome, namaste. I'm Kush Bhargava.
Okay. Andy.
Kia ora, I'm Andy Foster.
Did that go through on the string? I hope it did. Okay. Lily.
Ta-da! It's not Lily. I'm standing in for Lily Brown, the ACT candidate for Mana. My name is Sean Rush.
Okay. Let's reveal Barbara.
Hello, I'm not Barbara. I'm just standing in for...
And you're not standing, and she didn't nominate a stand-in. Okay, and next up, Frances.
And I'm not Frances, and she didn't nominate a stand-in.
Okay, and so this will be the tricks that will happen every single time when candidates do not come in there. We will leave a reminder on stage of a picture on the screen. So, and Jill's having the fun job of putting them all in. So thank you for joining us here tonight. So let's kick off with opening statements. Gina, would you like to fire off first since you're on the top on the website?
Yeah. Kia ora koutou katoa. Ko wai au ko Gina Dao-McLay tōku ingoa. My name's Gina, my pronouns are they, them. I'm the Green Party candidate for Mana this election. I grew up and have lived in Porirua for my whole life and decided to stand this year. Kind of as a bit of a shoulder tap after Dan Logie decided to retire from Parliament. I've always been interested in the Greens and in the Green kaupapa, and kind of some of those key issues for me are honouring te tiriti, stronger climate action, and also ensuring that we pull everyone out of poverty out here in Aotearoa.
Sorry. Go next up, Kush. We'll sort out my mic.
Thank you. Namaste, kia ora, welcome. I'm Kush Bhargava, representing Protect and Prosper New Zealand, a new political party with experienced leadership. This party, the policies we have are Protect, which means protect you, your family, property, business, health, and Prosper, which means growing your network, your family, and build resilience. I have been living in Aotearoa from last 13 years with my wife and 2 daughters. I have worked as an advisor to government organizations and managed local and international companies. I'm presently working as CEO of Eco Green Homes, building affordable green homes throughout the country. I'm entering politics because New Zealand is facing a lot of crisis and to secure my family and my society's future, I was motivated to enter politics and contribute to make a positive change. The question all of you will have, why should you vote me? I believe New Zealand needs a change. We are here to make a change. What had been done in past by ruling parties in the past 20 years has not shown any positive results. And the country is now facing many crises. If I'm elected, I can make sure local issues are raised. Being a center-based party candidate, I will work on our party's policies which are based on common sense and become your voice in Parliament. Thank you.
Okay, next up, Andy.
Kia ora and good evening. I'm Andy Foster and I'm your candidate for Mana for the New Zealand First Party. I'm standing because I believe that our country is losing its way, and I think 2/3 of New Zealanders also believe that. Our health system's not working, our education system's not working, the cost of living is obviously far too high, and 3/4 of us believe we are much more divided than we ever were before, and the cost of living, of course, is going through the roof. It's very, very clear to me that there is going to be a change in government, and I think the real question is, what kind of government do you want it to be? Do you want it to be a government which potentially goes to the extreme, which is not where I think most New Zealanders want to be, or a government where New Zealand First plays that moderating role in working with National and the ACT Party to change the government and to sort our country out?
Okay, and Sean.
Kia ora, folks. Yes, standing in for my colleague Lily Brown. I am actually the ACT candidate for Aotearoa next door. So just speaking on behalf of Lily, I know that she would say that she was attracted to the ACT Party as a consequence of the very intelligent and respectful debating, engaging style of our leader, David Seymour, and more latterly, Belden, and others now in our caucus. Being able to have an intelligent, respectful debate, listen to all parts of a argument, and to find common ground across the aisle, I think is a really important art, and one that has been lacking and more recently. So, as a consequence, sorry, buzzer's going off now. Anyway, yeah. So. We see the important issues as being the cost of living, as Andy said. We also see the crime issues that need to be addressed. But we also think that we are overdue for a sensible, respectful conversation on the place of the Treaty of Waitangi in the 21st century.
Okay, thank you for that. So we will now cross over to the electorate video, and you can find out where the Mana electorate boundaries are. Motorway with a gradient steeper than fell incline. Queen Elizabeth Regional Park, home of the US Marine Base at Mackay's Crossing during World War II, and the largest Pacifica population electorate in the lower North Island. So let's find out where the Mana electorate voters are based. Starting from the south, the Mana electorate starts with the northern half of Tawa, also includes Linden and Green Acres. Then heading north, it includes all of Porora City, including the suburbs of Titahi Bay in the west, Cannons Creek, Waitangaroa and Aotearoa in the east, Whitby, Patanui and Judgeford in the northeast, and Parramatta, Plympton, Mana and Pukekohe Bay in the north. Now leaving Porora and onto the Kapiti coast. The Mana electorate includes the villages of Paikakariki, Raumati, Paraparaumu Beach, and the east of Paraparaumu over the railway. Mana is home to 7.5 train stations, sharing an electoral boundary through the middle of Paraparaumu train station. It also has one transmission gully motorway with a gradient steeper than fell incline. Queen Elizabeth Regional Park, home of the US Marine Base at Mackay's Crossing during World War II, and the largest Pacifica population electorate in the lower North Island. Okay, and the questions we think you'll be asking after watching tonight's show, let's bring them up on screen. Now, will this election come down to parties' choices on free dental care and whether or not there should be an age for the cutoff? Will EV car chargers be installed halfway up transmission gully to help combat EV cars running out of juice on the steep incline, steeper than fell incline, climbing up the Wainui Settle? And how many meet the candidates are too many meet the candidates in the month of September? Is it 5, 10, 20? Or should we say, I think one candidate's here done over 30 before in the past. So those are the questions we think you'll be asking after watching tonight's show. So let's get off to the fun part. So we've got a few different changes that have happened since 2022. So we have, we've got rid of our booby questions, but we give each candidate, we give them 2 button cards. The button cards are used for when a question is asked that a candidate finds that they also want to answer. I can thank Leslie Stellinger for, I think that's how you say it. I'll be corrected because I know someone in here probably knows the name. She used to do that when I stood in 2019 for the Regional Council button for any DHB questions when she wasn't standing for that. And each candidate has 1 defer card. So if the question's a bit too curveball for them to answer, they can pass it on to the next one. So we've got 28 questions in the sealed boxes up there. So let's kick it off. Gina, what box number would you like to pick first?
I'll go number 3.
Number 3.
There we go, number 3. Selwyn always had a booby prize.
So you're taking money or the bag?
Yeah, good secure boxes there, so you know these questions haven't been tampered with. So, why is New Zealand reducing CO2 emissions when plants need CO2 to grow?
I think it's important to acknowledge that the CO2 levels produced currently, and the exorbitant amount of them that there are leading to the human-influenced climate change, which are, of course, way too much for plants, leading to significant changes to our natural systems. We know that planting more trees is one of those aspects of climate kind of resilience and emissions reduction that we do need to be taking part in. And I want to acknowledge those of us who do that tree planting each weekend and those kinds of things. But we do know that that's not enough, and there's so many more things that we need to be doing to cut our emissions because it is contributing to global warming at a much higher rate than we need it to be.
Okay, Kush, what box number would you like?
Number 1.
Number 1. All right. So, a man with ambition.
You're good?
Okay. What will happen to the winter energy payment if your party is elected to govern?
We believe that this is a very good policy and it should be kept running basically. So we'll keep it running and we promote it and support it.
Thank you.
Okay, Andy, what box number?
Let's try, what is it, 29, 28, 28.
Number
Let's try
28. Question K. Current information from overseas indicates that vaping is not a healthier alternative to smoking. Children of primary school age are becoming addicted. What is your party's plan to address this health concern?
Yeah, look, I think when vaping was originally promoted, it was very much as a way to get people off smoking. And I think that probably is its one role. It's less harmful, as I understand it, than smoking is. And the question is whether we actually go down the track of doing roughly what Australia does, which is to say you get effectively on some kind of prescription to be able to get yourself off smoking, but it's not available for anybody else just to pick it up and get addicted to vaping. We clearly have far too many vape shops in the country.
Okay, Sean.
What box number would you like?
Number 6.
Number 6. All right. Question AB. Okay, in your opinion, should mainstream media be funded by taxpayers?
I think there is a role for a state-supported media in some respects, but broadly speaking, it should be in very rare occasions, and the general rule should be no. Although that's not an ACT party policy, I should maybe point that out. ACT doesn't have a position on this particular issue, but that I would imagine would be the liberal sort of way of looking at it.
That's you encourage them to have that policy position.
Is he allowed to do that?
Only for you, Sean.
Well, if your party was in government, would you prevent him from doing that?
Once again, we're a
We've already
libertine,
worked very well together.
liberal democracy we live in. Would never restrain
Free speech. There
former
we go.
Mayor Foster from articulating whatever he wants in public.
Very kind of you, Sean.
Okay, and shall we ask? Oh, this is interesting. What happens when you? Okay, hopefully that will sit there and mute it as far as possible. No, it hasn't. Okay. Should we ask the empty chairs what box numbers they'll do, or should we head straight back to Gina? So what box number, Gina?
Can I go for 12?
Number 12, you can. Okay. Question H. How will your party address the high Māori incarceration rates compared with other ethnicities?
Yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge that here in Aotearoa we have higher Māori incarceration rates, but particularly for wahine Māori as well. We've been really awesome to have Marama Davidson as Minister for the Prevention of Family Violence and Sexual Violence. And in her strategy to Aore Kura, not only are they talking about addressing kind of those outcomes, but also addressing crime and this incarceration from the roots and from the core, from that community-based level as well. So again, kind of acknowledging the community support that is needed when it comes to things like this, but also acknowledging that when it comes to crime and those kinds of things, supporting people in poverty, supporting people who might be wanting to or be prepared to commit those crimes. We actually need a full all wrapped around approach for them as well.
Okay, Kush, next up, what box number?
Number 9. Okay, question X. Okay, given that property investors often outbid first-time home buyers at house auctions, how would you encourage property investors to switch to more productive investments?
Based on our research, our party has found that most of the problem is Kiongara. They go and buy big sections of big developers' land. So I think basically it's not a problem from property investors. Kiongara should be controlled how they bid the land or the developer's land. That's what we believe.
Okay, Andy, what box number?
Box number 16. All right. Okay, and that is question Q.
When it gets there.
It's not fast tonight, is it?
Oh, I think it's the laptop. Yeah, see, my Stream Deck has even budged a bit.
We have a frozen computer, do we?
Oh, it's only got 8 gig of RAM. Oh, it shouldn't do it. The separate system now.
Okay. What will your party do to make it easier for asylum seekers to enter Aotearoa?
Look, I think the first thing is when somebody comes seeking asylum is you've got to obviously get through reasonably quickly the process of working out whether the asylum seeking is legitimate or not. The other thing is that when you are accepting people, is you've got to, often people are coming from very distressed situations, whether that's refugee or asylum seekers, and it's putting the support around those people. That's both community support, government support, and sometimes it's local authority support as well. So that's the key, is being a really welcoming community for the people who we want to accept into our community.
Okay, Sean, what box number?
20.
Box number 20. Okay, question J. Parents throughout New Zealand are voicing their concerns about certain aspects of the relationships and sexuality curriculum year 1 to 10. Their concern is that some areas of the teaching content are not age appropriate. If elected, will your party review this concern with the public and make the appropriate changes?
So quite relevant to me as a parent of a 6 and 9-year-old. I share the concerns, and I know the party does too. The ACT Party supported the changes in the legislation allowing people to self-identify on birth certificates, and felt that was the right thing to do because of choice, and the ACT Party is all about choice. However, it soon became quite clear that actually, whilst attempting to accommodate a minority of Kiwis in this manner, all sorts of other restrictions suddenly started applying to the majority of folks. Now that's more about the women's spaces and so forth, but I think that also pushes into the area that we're talking about, which is sexuality education for children. And I think it's certainly something that needs to be looked at. Having my children being told that it's okay to think that you're in the wrong body when they're only tiny children, it just doesn't sound right. So I think it does need to have another look. I think the ACT Party will support that too.
Can I butt in?
If you use your card.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
All right, I'll take
Okay.
that.
Shouldn't you butt in at the beginning?
Oh, we're ironing it out, obviously. Sometimes you realise afterwards, it's like, I want to butt in on that one.
Kia ora. I just want to acknowledge that as a queer person, as a member of the rainbow community, and someone who didn't go to school not that long ago as well, that all that we learn in those curriculums don't change us. I read a lot of stories about straight couples when I was in picture books when I was growing up, and that didn't turn me straight either. And so thinking that that would happen the opposite way just I don't think is true. I think it's important to acknowledge that in this teaching content, it's actually a really small part of that wider curriculum that people are learning at this age. And also acknowledging that there are always options for parents to not have their kids be going through that, but also that the Greens are committed and have been to trans rights, to rainbow rights, and to ensuring, particularly here in Aotearoa, that we acknowledge the mana takatapui here at Aotearoa as well.
Thank you.
Okay, and Gina, what's your next box number after button in?
Can I do 21?
21.
You can, and you may. All right. You are question I. What are Mana's community aspirations? How can central government contribute to them?
I think there's a few things, and also acknowledging that Mana is a diverse electorate. We don't all think the exact same way and don't all want the exact same things. But I know particularly in Porirua at the moment, through the Porirua Community Leaders Forum, which I'm fortunate to be a part of, we're creating that utility-based citizens assembly alongside Ngāti Toa, acknowledging that the climate crisis is with us, and the kind of actions that we need to take for that need to come from the community. And so I think that's something that central government can continue to contribute to, that is that support, is that funding for those things to happen here in Mana, but also in other communities that want that as well.
Okay, next up, Kush. What box number?
14. Number 14. Okay, question AA.
It doesn't
Here we
want-
go. Okay. In your opinion, what is the main issue that New Zealand is facing currently? Just a small question.
Yeah. I think based on our party's policy, PPNZ, we believe the biggest issue is cost of living, housing, health, and a proper government. So I don't think we have a proper government which can head this country. So cost of living is a major issue, health issue, not having affordable houses. These are, I think, major issues, I think, and especially the safety, public safety.
Okay, Andy,
Button.
go
Right.
in.
Let me take that from you there, Andy. Make sure you don't use it again. Only get it once.
But spare on doing that. Look, in our opinion, the biggest issue is our productivity and our competitivity. What you're seeing at the moment is that people in many professions can get 20, 30, 40% more in terms of wages going across the Tasman. And if we're going to try and keep people in this country, if we're going to keep building our economy, if we're going to keep the services that we need to, we have to grow our productivity. We've been slipping against other countries. So that's the key thing. It's getting our economy working really, really strongly, getting our productivity up. And I'm really looking forward to getting our policy out in front of the country, because I think most people have been talking, most of the parties have been talking about how to divide up the cake, or potentially to, a little bit of tax relief here or tax relief there. What we've really got to do is grow that cake. And if we don't grow that cake, we are going to be struggling to afford all of the services that we want, all the aspirations that we want.
Okay, now let's get to your box number.
We're working really well together then.
So what's the box number, Andy?
Let's go for number 2, please.
Number 2. Okay, question Z. All right. In your opinion, should councils be forced by the Ministry of Health to fluoridate the water supplies?
Well, I see it's in my opinion, not in the party's opinion. One of the things I served for 30 years on council, both as a councillor and as mayor. There was one issue which got raised time and time again for a period of time, and it was fluoridation. And it was usually by the people who didn't want the water fluoridated. And the reality was that as elected members, the real issue here is who makes the decision, who is qualified to make the decision. And the reality is that councils are not expert in that, the staff are not expert in that, and neither of the elected members are expert in that. And so we always deferred to the Ministry of Health and said, what's the Ministry of Health's advice? The Ministry of Health's advice was this was good for oral health, for oral hygiene, and we took that advice all the time. And then local government collectively said, and that was, so councils across the country said to the government, please, it's not often that we would do this, but please can you take this responsibility away from us? Most of the time councils don't like that. This time we said, you guys know better than we do on this one. Can you please take that responsibility away for us? So it's not being forced to do it. It's saying who makes the decision, who is best qualified to make the decision. And in my view, that's the Ministry of Health.
Okay, Sean.
Have we done 22?
No, we haven't, but we're about to.
Awesome.
All right. Okay, question G. What is your or your party's policy on addressing the inequity of those who own property and those who rent?
Yeah, thanks. It's a bit of an odd
Do you
question.
need to use your defer card?
I wasn't going to. I mean, inequity arises from a multitude of different things. Perhaps they manifest themselves in some people who have been able to afford to buy a home and others who are renting. But there's a lot of reasons why people rent. I think most of us probably have at some point in time. I've probably rented more of my life than I have owned a house. I don't see either one as being particularly inequitable. The ACT Party won't have a policy on dividing people up between renters and homeowners in order to fix some inequity.
Okay. Kush, you want to use your button card?
Right. Collect that. Thank you.
PPNZ has unique policies We want to build affordable green homes in the price range of around $600,000, including land. And plus we have policies where we can rent to own houses. So that way, the percentage of people not having houses will, after a few years, probably after 5 or 10 years, will be equal. So slowly people who don't have houses or who can't afford houses can slowly own their houses. High quality green homes. Thank you.
Okay, Gina, what box number?
We've got 27.
We do have 27, yes. That is question L. All right. Do you personally think that it is important that women and girls, using the standard biological definition in brackets there, should have exclusive access to some services, spaces, facilities, and sports for the sake of their dignity, safety, and right to fairness?
I think it's important, firstly, to acknowledge that your trans women are women, trans men are men, and people who are non-binary deserve spaces where we can feel safe in our gender-neutral facilities. There are many spaces that are that already exist. For example, like the Women's Refuge.
Come on, let's
Quiet from the audience, please.
Come on, let's hear the candidates.
And yeah, important to acknowledge that there are already some spaces that exist for women, and we want to continue that and support those, but also supporting those who don't want to, who want spaces that are gender neutral for anyone as well.
Okay, Kush. Oh, you want to use your button card?
A button? Didn't you just button?
Yeah, I know. It felt
Oh,
like
you got
it.
two.
At PPNZ, we believe that they should have they should have exclusive access area. We want it to stay as it has been from the last 100 years, and keep biological man separate from biological women.
So what happens if Georgina wants to use the bathroom for Georgina Byer?
Yeah, we basically believe that there should be more private bathrooms, more cubicles, instead of using the same one, because that won't, woman or man won't be comfortable. So there should be more bathrooms, basically, or private bathrooms or cubicles.
Okay, so now let's get to
sorry, is that another button card being
Yeah, I'll
used?
do a button,
Yep.
if that's okay. And just really, I suppose, going back to what I was saying earlier, where the ACT Party felt it was the right thing to do to support, the choice of people to identify as a gender that's different from their sex at birth. That was something we felt was important. We supported it, but it does seem, though, that the accommodation of those particular individuals seems to be a one-way street, and there needs to be a two-way street. When you accommodate one group of people, of New Zealanders, we expect there to be some sort of reciprocation for the accommodation of others, such as women and girls in the areas that are mentioned. Going back to what I started with, though, it needs a respectful conversation, one that shows empathy and compassion, in order that we can all deal with this as New Zealanders and as grown-ups, and that's why I'm with the ACT Party.
Okay, Kush. Now, box number is it this time?
19, yes. Okay, question E. Do you or your party feel that tougher penalties are required for those convicted of animal abuse as a deterrent?
Yeah, at PPNZ, we have a policy basically to double the penalty for both individuals and companies who are not basically following the Animal Act. And we also believe that the Animal Act should be basically reinvestigated, and a new Animal Act should be developed with the latest options, public opinion as well.
Okay, Andy, what box number?
I think is that 8 there?
Number 8, yes. Question S. Do you support the right to women's safe, legal and timely access to abortion in New Zealand?
A very quick answer, yes.
Okay. Anyone wants to use a button card? Even though I feel that we might be in a consensus from the candidates. Sure, what box number?
25.
25.
My first odd number tonight.
At least keep tabs on it.
Okay, question P. You're on P, Sean.
Okay.
What is your or your party's commitment to conservation for the next term?
So we are quite a unique bunch, not just in the ACT Party, but I mean by Kiwis, because we all, I think, have an elevated level of care for the environment, and we want to do good things for conservation. For us, we will be proposing a $10 million biodiversity fund in order that we can protect wetlands and native bush. Yeah, so that's our commitment.
Okay. Gina, what box number?
Have you done 23?
All right, number 23. I thought we were going to have a button from the Greens there, but there you go.
I'm going to be conservative with my other one. I don't know what I want yet.
Cool.
Conservation.
Conservative, being conservative on the button card.
Hey, you've got to play them strategically. Okay, question N. So what is your party's stance on central bank digital currency, and will your party support removing cash from being used in New Zealand?
I want to acknowledge this question is one that I hadn't thought about too much, but I've been well educated on it in the past 24 hours. So yeah, the Greens are not supporting the creation of a digital currency, not a priority amongst the other financial changes we can be so focused on to support people. But also acknowledging, particularly in that part about removing cash, around how recently, we've removed checks. Lots of things are now online when it comes to banking, and we need to support those who maybe used to be able to go to the bank and do their things, particularly some older whānau who might not be so well literate in digital, and using online and apps and that kind of thing to support them as well.
So could that mean I actually get a post office back in my electorate, Rongotai, where I've got to head to Wellington Central to buy car rego? Yeah.
Right.
Oh, and actually, I go to a Haru to do it actually because that's you can get a car park there easier, and I mean I keep going to the Kadala post shop forever.
Cycle to the Newtown VTNZ.
Yeah, well, they've got a car park there actually.
Not if you carry.
Not for much longer.
Well, no, what they're removing it inside the property? God, you find out new things every night. Kush, what box number?
Number 11. All right. Question M. Just waiting for it to come up.
N for
M.
November.
M for mystical. Okay.
Oh, M for mystical. Yeah, it's got. Yeah, no, it's showing up here as with a different number on there. It's going to question 12. What's the what's M in the alphabet?
Yeah.
13.
Oh, there you go. That was quick, Andy.
Okay, there we are. That looks a lot better. I think I must have the string deck tuned to the to number. Was it number L? Was it twice or something in there?
All right. So who's the question for? Kush, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. With the downturn in the economy, many small businesses are struggling to stay afloat. Has your party got any policies that would assist them through these tough times?
PPNZ has several unique policies. First of all, we want to help small businesses with a soft loan or business loans. The biggest problem that we are facing today is, like, for example, many builders are liquidating, So out of 100 builders, 80 or 90 builders are genuine, but they have an issue with cash flow, similarly like other businesses. And banks are not supporting any small business. It's very, very hard to get a financial loan or a business loan because most of the owners are self-employed. So banks want to see their 3 years financials. Even last year when government declared that you can go to the banks during the COVID scenario, builders were not able to get more than $10,000. So something has to be done where the banks should be given some intense incentive or something to basically help the businesses and put more money in businesses instead of properties.
Supplementary, would this be a directive if you're in the government from directing, say, our SOE Kiwi Bank to do that?
Basically, Kiwi Bank is the best option, and there should be proper policies. We are not saying that the money should be given like a grant, but every big builders, every big businesses have their own properties. So if someone has a property of 1.5 million and he has a loan of $500,000, it's even very hard to get $100,000 cash flow. And banks want 3 years cash, like financials. But if a person is working in that office, he will get the loan easily. So, and that is the reason we are not developing. If you see overseas, if you go to Australia, other countries, if a builder has 10 or $20 million of job or business in the pipeline, banks will immediately come and give him the money. If you see the history of New Zealand, what is happening in New Zealand, if one builder collapses, he might have 10 houses and the value of 10 houses is like $10 million. So someone with $10 million, even if he makes 10%, he can easily be making $1 million. But because of COVID and all these government policies where the JIP was an issue, so these builders collapse, then the subcontractor collapses, then the client who owns the house collapses. So there's a whole cycle. And we lose probably 20-30% money. Even the bank loses money because when they go for a mortgage sale, they won't get that money. But there's no proper policy, and I think there's not enough knowledge the government has, and they don't have any practical experience with the businesses.
Okay. Andy, what box number?
Is that 5 on the end there?
It is 5. Would you like
Let's
it?
go for 5.
All right. Right. Question why? No. Actually, this is a double up. I'm going to ask the question that's on the screen. In your opinion, should we change the voting age to 16 years old?
This is a place where the New Zealand First Party is pretty clear that there are quite a number of different constitutional issues which are in front of us. We've had a review done by the current government which made quite a number of suggestions. This was one of those. Our view is that those should only go through on the basis of a referendum, and we have quite a number of these. So we've got the voting age is one, the threshold for parties getting into Parliament is one, the 4-year term is one, and you might, if you're really feeling inclined, you might think about head of state issues as well. So there's quite a number of different constitutional issues that I believe we need to tackle, and they've been kind of pushed aside. The last time we had a decent look at that, we ended up with a flag referendum, and that was a complete waste of an opportunity. So I think this is a grown-up conversation that we need to have as a country, and so I believe it is a decision that needs to be made by the people for the people. It's their democracy, not the parliamentarians.
Interesting nexus of democracy, rule of law, and human rights in there, right?
And not answering the question.
So is that a yes or a no, Andy? I think that's what he's getting at.
That depends on you guys.
Okay, cool.
It's the vote of the people. It's a constitutional issue. It's a constitutional issue, and parliamentarians should not be the ones who make the constitutional decisions of that magnitude. In fact, I was surprised by the comments by the review panel. They said that quite a number of things should go to a referendum. This one they thought shouldn't, and that seemed inconsistent.
Okay. What box number, Sean?
I'll go back to my even numbers. Let's go 24.
24.
How are we looking on the box numbers? Oh, we look like we're going to be emptying them
We're going to get there.
We've got 8 more after this one.
Oh, heck.
Button or defer or something like that.
No, we're doing quite well.
Okay, question O. Do you support the current Kapiti Coast District Council, KCDC, process regarding coastal adaptation areas and the work done by the Coastal Advisory Panel?
Yeah, I've actually got quite a bit of knowledge about this one. So I'm the only politician standing for election this year that's got a Master's in Climate Change Science and Policy. And when I was a city councillor with Andy, my constituents were South Coastal ratepayers, and I followed the sea level story that came out in May in the last year. And since then, I've followed sea level as part of my studies. And what I don't know is that there are several flaws with Jim's work. Jim's using, first of all, he's using outdated science relating to scenarios that the IPCC have considered implausible. I was an expert reviewer for the IPCC, so kind of have read this stuff. Secondly, the study talks about subsidence, which was over a very short period, but actually the Company Coast in particular has been showing signs of lifting out of the ocean rather than the opposite. And that hasn't featured in Jim's study at all either. I think thirdly, Jim's work ignores the 6,000-year trend, which is that the Company Coast is getting further and further away from State Highway 1. And really, until we see that starting to reverse, I would say we shelve Jim's report and say thanks very much.
Okay, Gina, what box number?
Can I be reminded of what we've got left, please?
Okay, so we have 4, 7, 10, 13, 15, 17, 18, and 26.
Or 26, please.
Number 26. Okay, question F. Okay, there is evidence to suggest that there is a connection between those who abuse animals and those who abuse children and people. What steps would you or your party take to reduce animal and child abuse?
Acknowledging that we have that plan in place already to Aotearoa, which is to tackle family violence and sexual violence. So continuing that progress, acknowledging that it's not something that can happen in just 3 years, but a long process in and of itself. And then, acknowledging also that there's lots of kind of different reasons as to why someone takes part in these things, and how we need to be treating those root causes rather than just an ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. But also acknowledging that in the animal rights space, the Greens, we've got a solid plan on how we want to be doing things like supporting an animals commissioner and other key processes to defer that and to not have that animal abuse here in Aotearoa as well.
Okay, Kush, what box number?
Number 4, yes. Question A. Porirua City Council sewage treatment plant is still operating on an expired resource consent. As the electorate MP, how would you advocate to ensure the treatment plant is compliant, and how will that impact my rates?
I think the biggest issue is that plant has very old technologies, and I did some research and found out that they're throwing the waste material in the sea, so that should be definitely stopped. And we should have latest technology, treatment plant. And what I found that if what is happening mostly with councils, the product which you can get for $1, they spend $2. So we would need some international proper procurement process where we can get international big companies to tender it, and we can do the project at half the cost. That will save the cost, that we can get a new technology, and that will also save in the rates. So a proper system should be used, and I don't think that present councils have proper system for international green procurements. So that should be done properly.
Go on then. Let's have that. Come on. Don't want you overusing it.
So I just thought I'd butt in. As a Wellington City Councillor, I sat on the joint wastewater treatment plant committee with my colleagues at the Porirua, because the wastewater from parts of Wellington actually goes through this plant. What we're seeing really is, first of all, you're absolutely right, Kush, it's older technology. The overflow is into the harbour. Whereas at least in Wellington, the overflow is 2 kilometres offshore into the Cook Strait, and no one likes to see that happen, but at least it preserves the shallow areas. So that would be a step in the right direction. the last meeting I went to, I was incredulous that the Porirua City Council were not prioritising debottlenecking of this plant, and were prioritising other things, but to some extent, in that, you know, it was their decision and their ratepayers, but it really is a local body issue. The ACT Party, on the other hand, would part of our GST return scheme. So if you're upgrading big infrastructure like this, it would qualify for half the GST spent would be given back to the council. So that would be an incentive for them to do it. We also think that you know, it's part of the Three Waters network, I suppose. We will see the Three Waters stay in the hands of local councils, but we would give additional financing tools which would allow private sector investment in these sorts of projects, which are actually pretty ideal actually for private sector investment. So there's a lot that can be done, and ACT's got a lot of good ideas in which could help the folks of Porirua.
Okay, Andy. What
Let's
box number?
try 17, please.
17. Okay, question C. What are you or your party going to do about the climate crisis?
Oh, this sounds like a beauty to defer to the ACT Party. Given Sean's previous answer.
Yeah, I'm very happy to take that one on. As mentioned, I'm the only politician that's actually taken a year off work, studied full time, and got a master's in the subject, and still routinely am told what the climate's doing by unqualified people, and particularly politicians. But nevertheless, the ACT Party is one of the reasons why I jumped ship from the National Party, actually, because the ACT Party had a pragmatic approach to the climate issue. Calling it a crisis a political statement. It's not actually mentioned by the IPCC as such. But moving on, I mean, the ACT Party thinks that like any other moral issue that faces our international community, we should look to see what our trading partners and allies, traditional allies, are doing in the space, like going to Gulf War. Did we think that we were going to stop Saddam on our own? Of course we didn't. We put our troops together in a measured way and did our bit for the international community, but we didn't bring in the draft. We didn't send everything into the war zone. So, and we see climate as being no different to that. We would benchmark our response to our 5 main trading partners and allies, and would track what they are doing in the space, and that would be what we think is an appropriate result. We would get rid of the net zero target. We think it's heroic without actually having a lucid pathway to get there. It simply requires you to adopt policy that simply is not very good for the economy. So we would scrap that, would keep the ETS, and the ETS would be benchmarked to our international trading partners.
Can I butt in?
Yes, go ahead.
Have you still got a button card? Oh, there we go.
Yeah, so there's a kind of a couple of two kind of sides to this that the Greens are proposing and looking at. So that's the emissions reduction, but also that climate adaptation. And so in that emissions reduction space, we've got things like bringing agricultural pricing into the ETS, and then our clean power payment. So helping households to switch that clean energy by giving grants, by giving that 6K grant to help cover the cost of installing solar panels and other kind of energy efficient upgrades, depending on that household itself. But also introducing interest-free loans, because we know that for people who do want to switch to that cleaner energy, it can be a massive cost for them. And what happens when we do switch to those cleaner energies, it lowers the power bill. So we're actually kind of addressing that cost of living aspect in that as well. And the other kind of key part of that is our climate safe communities plan. So creating spongy cities, creating spaces that are green spaces for us, more spaces for people to be in, for public spaces, and also that important transport emission reduction by things like light rail, active transport as well.
Okay, we're finally going to get to Sean for his box number, and it will be our last because we're 2 minutes from 8 o'clock.
Let's go 10.
Number 10.
I've got one defer card left.
Okay, question W. Good one to end the night on.
Oh, goodness.
What is your party's position on Three Waters reform? Do you have an alternative model? I think this should be for everybody, right?
So as former Mayor Foster will testify, I led the Wellington City Council through the Three Waters reform. In fact, I championed it well before most of the other politicians that sat around the Wellington Water Committee table had really figured out what their position would be. But I championed it because I'm a mergers and acquisitions lawyer, and I know that the value that can come with aggregating things can actually lead to a lot of really good synergies. But unfortunately, the government took a bit of a left turn when it decided to use the process to establish differential rights in governance, and also to make the entities all singing or dancing and lose local voice. So, and another reason why I leapt to the ACT Party was because they were saying the things that I was thinking as well. So the ACT Party will repeal the Three Waters legislation. Assets will be kept, ownership and control with local councils. Andy might recall some of this from my submission that I did, because what we think actually is that councils will be encouraged, and they will effectively emerge their water management capability in order to bank the synergies of scale that I mentioned earlier do come, but they won't be forced to do it. Once again, we will allow the 50% GST rebate will be available for investment in Three Waters. We'll allow private investment into the market as well, which we think will provide additional funds to be able to get us to where we want to be.
I just want to, Andy's putting in a button. Yep, go ahead.
Well, I had the pleasure of Sean and I sitting together when we had a mayoral task force in response to a lot of water failures in Wellington City. And our position is very much this, it's very similar to what Sean has talked about. It's the loss of local control is a key thing. So we've got a government which has been desperately trying to centralise all kinds of things. Most of them are not working very well. Centralisation is, I mean, we are a much more centralised country than most other countries in the world. And there is no magic in that particular model, whether it's the health system, whether it's the education system, whether it's the water system in this case. And our view is that you don't take away those assets and the control and the responsiveness to the community. They are predicating the model which they've got on massive efficiency gains, which I believe are illusory. They also are setting in place some really pretty gold-plated standards. And they talk about $180+ billion, and they're really looking at borrowing that. Now, when you think about where our economy is at the moment in terms of the amount of money we've already borrowed, and you want to go and put that on top of that, it's really basically borrowing from our kids and our grandchildren. I think that's a problem. And then, of course, you've got as Sean said, the separation of, we essentially have built into this model 2 different standards of citizenship. And that, I think, is something that for many of us, we feel very, very uncomfortable about. That we should respect water, we should respect Maori values, but having 2 different classes of citizen is something which I don't think sits very easily with most New Zealanders. And I think that's behind that that poll result, which says that 77% of us feel that the country is more divided than it was before.
Okay, thank you, candidates, for answering the questions. Thank you, Bede, for opening the boxes. We're going to take a quick break and see you back in about 10 minutes' time, where these candidates be a bit more refreshed for hard-hitting questions.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and welcome back to It's in the Ballot. Now let's kick in for hard-hitting questions. Okay, so for hard-hitting questions, these questions are ones that all candidates are expected to answer, and they are particularly thorny issues that could be in the community tonight. So we've got 2 hard-hitting questions because for the general election we decided to go for 2 because the third hard-hitting question with the private members bill one. So we can sit there and do it. Now, candidates cannot use their button or defer cards, but they're answering anyway, so you don't need to use them. So the first hard-hitting question one, I realise I haven't actually put my hard-hitting question graphics onto the stream deck, but that's all right. I've got the computer, so I can get around that. So anyone knows me knows I'm a bit of a rail buff as well. So the question is, what is your party's policy on the duplication of the North Island main trunk line between Paikakariki and Pukera Bay? Let's kick off with Sean.
Just a clarification, so that's not the electric unit passenger light rail?
No, that is the North Island main trunk line. It's a known bottleneck that limits the Kapiti line to 20-minute services.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, the ACT Party's got very firm policies on infrastructure. Just so you know, one of my roles in London was to work with one of the major railway groups, and we provided advice on public-private partnerships to those organisations. And broadly speaking, the papers worked, and the funding went. So it was certainly non-political over there. I mean, it was really a Tony Blair Labor government that was championing these PPP projects. So I was always mystified when I came back to New Zealand to find that the Labor Party here didn't like them, but it seems that was because I think the Nats must have thought of it first over here. So in reality, they're just a financing tool, very, very useful in times when times are tight, cash is tight, when interest rates are very high. It makes a lot of sense to shift it to a AAA rated international infrastructure multinational who do these sorts of things every day. There does need to be a lot of care taken in the drafting, and it needs to be managed very carefully. And that's my observation here in New Zealand, is that the implementation of these things has been quite poor. The A-team staff that do the negotiations are let go, and unfortunately they aren't there to make sure that the contractors do their job. So the party would say that that infrastructure is one of the most important things we need to do to improve our productivity, and that goes towards our economy. So it's the economy is stupid. I think that a project such as this would fit very nicely into our PPP ideas, and it would need to be prioritised. And I don't quite have a feel for exactly where that would be amongst things, but given a part of Wellington, which is Lily will be championing, it'll be a high priority.
Okay. Thanks for that, Andy. What's yours or New Zealand First's policy on duplication of the main trunk line between Paikakuri and Pukera Bay, which also lies in the Mana electorate?
Well, where I'm going to start is where the project actually is at. So the Wellington Regional Council, which is responsible for planning for the rail system in this area, thinks it's a good idea. It's part of a just over $10 billion package of, that's $10 billion net package of infrastructure they want to build over the next decade or so. Their intention is for this bit to do a little bit of work on it, and obviously also there's already been the duplication of the bit north of Paikakariki. That's been done. This bit's the really, really hard bit, because you're talking about the Paikakariki escarpment. So this is not going to be cheap, it's not going to be easy, and environmentally it might be challenging. There might be some consent issues there as well. So their intention is just to squeeze that the gap, which is the bit which is not duplicated at the moment, for immediately or very soon, and then to look to do this duplication starting in about 2028. So it's a little way off. I think the key here is we've always been very, very pro-rail as a party. The key here is that prioritisation issue, which is what Sean was talking about. We have enormous infrastructure needs as a country, and we've got to make sure that we invest in the things which give us the biggest bang for buck. Because if we're going to be more productive, one of the things we need to do is we need to invest in the infrastructure which is the most productive infrastructure. So the answer to this is, you've got a little bit of time to think about it. We need to think about it clearly, thoughtfully, because if we invest in the wrong infrastructure, we're actually going to make our productivity worse rather than better. At the moment, there are 3 trains an hour at peak, sometimes 4 at peak, and the Regional Council is expecting to go to about 10 in about 15 years' time. If you get to that and all the assumptions they're built in there about population growth
And your
and
time's up
traffic,
as well.
then it will be needed. But
Sorry.
I think you need to know that first.
Which time are you putting it on?
60 or 120?
60.
Get
Gee, he's
120. Yes.
Okay, Kush. Looks like you're going to have to put that on for every candidate now to make it fair.
I've given them the facts now, so they don't need to worry about those.
Our party supports putting money in the infrastructure as long as we can have a vision for the next 20 years. So basically, if you see the transmission gully, it took several years, probably 3 times or 4 times what the international standards were. So even if this is done, it should be done properly with proper team. And if we can do this, basically the best thing would be we can use safe trucks on the road, because trucks, when they go on the road, there's a lot of destruction. So if we have proper trains for, if we have proper rail lines, we can use rails instead of trucks, and this will have less carbon, and this will basically generate less carbon emissions, good for the climate change, and basically it will also help the public as well. Thank you.
Okay, Gina.
Yeah, the Greens are really keen to be investing more in nationwide rail, and I think that this part of our train line is one that could definitely be done and prioritised first, particularly as we know that more people are moving north and still working in town. Having that opportunity for them to take the train to and from work or other activities is really important. And also considering we've been having those upgrades to the capital connection for those who are a little bit further out, whether that's to work or play, being able to get into the city as well is really important. But also acknowledging the kind of other issues like fare fares, ensuring that they're accessible. We can bring bikes on board and that kind of thing as well.
Okay, thank you for that. And while we're shifting to a little bit of a different issue, I know we're in Paraparaumu here, but Porirua is equally important when it comes to the electorate. What is your party's policy to get families out of emergency accommodation in Porirua City and into long-term stable housing? Who would like to start that one off? Sean.
Yeah, I've got a bit of party policy which I can give to you, and also a few thoughts from some people who know what they're talking about, which I would hope would become party policy. So in Porirua, we are very blessed actually to have the services of a community housing provider run by Ngāti Toa, known as Porirua Whānau Centre. And they tell me that actually one of the big problems that arose with government policy was the change in the interest deductibility by landlords. So they're actually telling us that that immediately caused landlords to cease being landlords, to sell, and that took rentable properties off the market, and actually has worked backwards against trying to achieve places for folks in need. The ACT Party policy is to reverse that and to make interest deductible again. We think that will encourage more investment into renting rentable housing, something like a good thing. The other point.
Time's up.
How long are we supposed to have?
1 minute. I know Ray made a mistake putting the 2-minute timer on. Get your last little 2 cents worth in there. I mean, it's still worth listening to.
The last thing is that the government's also stopped the community housing providers from being able to manage existing properties on behalf of owners who want to provide social housing, but the government's forcing them to go through kāinga rua, which is simply unattractive.
Okay, Andy.
Well, the first thing to do is to say that long-term accommodation in emergency accommodation is simply unacceptable. We've gone from something like 3 weeks as being the average time that people were in emergency accommodation in 2017. It's now up at about 27 weeks. I think it was 21 weeks. So that's simply unacceptable with all the impacts that has, particularly on children. And roughly 3,000 children are in emergency accommodation across the country at the moment. In the Wellington region, it's about 390 families who are in emergency accommodation. Key thing there, the other thing is that often you've got people with significant needs, and when they're all thrown together, that that causes all kinds of problems. So they need to have wraparound support. But the key thing there is more housing, and whether that is more, as Sean said, is getting more housing out of the private sector, or whether it's the state sector or the community housing providers building more housing. It's more housing, and more housing is the answer to the problem. And if we're going to get that more housing, we've got to make the building of that housing cheaper. So we've got to have some mechanisms for doing that, whether that is modular housing, whatever it might be, so that the cost of building the housing is cheaper.
And you were perfect on 60 seconds. Okay, Kush.
At PPNZ, we believe that every New Zealander has a right to live in a house, and housing should not be treated like a product. So basically, we propose to develop a plan to address the current emergency housing crisis, get all the emergency housing residents out of emergency housing and put them into a permanent housing, develop a satisfactory solution to relocate all the large numbers of people living in cars into permanent housing, develop a property development financial model, and deal structure involving the combination of public and private partnership so that accommodation can be produced in large quantities at the most affordable price. So, and there's plenty of land available outside the city which government should be using. They should buy it, and if government funds the land, the houses could easily be built, and they can be using the rent to buy model. So slowly, after a couple of years, or probably 5 or 10 years, we can have 10 or 20% people just left without housing, and 80% people can achieve to live in a good quality house.
Perfect 60 seconds. Gina.
So the Greens have released our pledge to renters, and so some of that will come under what we can do here in Porirua and in the wider mana electorate. So things like rent controls, a rental warrant of fitness, alongside that density done well in more housing and more community housing that we so really need. But particularly for those of our unhoused whānau or those who are in emergency accommodation, ensuring we're supporting them with those wraparound services as we're getting them into that longer term stable housing, and also ensuring that they've got enough money to live on through our income guarantee, ensuring that they're able to provide for their whānau, provide for those who maybe have disabilities in their whānau as well, because we know it's not just, we can't just solve one of those issues, we need to be working together on them.
Okay, you have a fair bit of time left. Okay. So now the other thing that we get up to with every new set of MPs, and this question in theory should be different for every single person who appears on it in the ballot. What would be your first private member's bill you put into the ballot? Now, these private members' bills are not government bills. It's usually as was it one Wednesday per sitting day fortnight. It's a convoluted way it works. That is set aside where the government's agenda put aside and for private members' bills. The most famous one we know of is the euthanasia bill. There's a waste minimisation bill was one that went through there, and I'm trying to think. There was the bereavement leave for miscarriage was another private members' bill that went through. That went through Parliament. So, Gina, what would be your first private member's bill if elected to Parliament?
Luckily for the Greens, we actually have to answer this when we're becoming a candidate. So I had a pre-thought before, and for me, and one of the big issues and the reasons why I'm standing for the Greens is our commitment to rainbow rights and to our communities here in Aotearoa. And one of those issues is for our intersex and ira tangata whānau, so ensuring that they're not their rights are continuing to be upheld. And so I think for me, one of those key issues is to be putting the prohibition on the discrimination for our intersex and ira tangata communities into that Human Rights Act, because it's been done in other countries, and we should be doing that here in Aotearoa as well.
Okay, and you've still got a minute 22 to go. Okay, Kush, what will be your first private member's bill?
Yeah, at Protect and Prosper, we are suggesting to have a sugar tax, basically to cover the subsidy of dental treatment. We propose that we can have 100% subsidy to help pay the immediate and essential dental treatment of all ages by having a sugar tax. This sugar tax has worked properly and has very good examples in 50 countries globally. So basically, we have also launched a petition, and we have more than 900 signatures on this sugar tax.
would a bottle of trim milk be subjected to the sugar tax, considering trim milk has more lactose sugar in it than blue top milk?
Yeah, that's a natural sugar. We are proposing whichever you put artificial sugar like.
So my coconut milk won't be touched. Good.
Yeah, coconut milk. That is a natural sugar.
It's all right. I mean, yeah, that's been annoying being a barista allergic to cow's milk.
Especially drinks and all those things.
Yeah. Okay, Andy, what will be your first private member's bill?
I was going to say you could always make a submission on Kush's bill anyway to express your fears. Look, I thought about some pieces of legislation which I suspect we picked up as government bills, but one would certainly be to establish some form of a regulatory review authority to try and deal with some of the over-regulation that we have in the country. But thinking about a local type bill, I'm really, really keen on establishing a national heritage park on the Miramar Peninsula in Wellington, and I believe some legislation is likely to be required to do that, to set up the way in which it will be managed from now into perpetuity between community, iwi, councils and so on. And I think that will be a fabulous national asset for the region because of all the heritage values, the natural features that are encompassed in that area. It's something that a lot of people have been fighting for a very long time.
Is that similar to the Wellington Town Belt bill that they had to actually put a special bill through Parliament to stop houses being built on it, for example?
Well, the Town Belt Act wasn't there specifically to stop houses being built on it, but given that people keep trying to want to build houses on the golf course, it probably does no harm to have a piece of legislation which actually protects it. And these things basically, and it could be any part of the country, it's so easy for people to look at precious green spaces and say, oh, look, we can just take a little bit here and a little bit there. And what happened to the Town Belt over the early years of its time is that a third of it was taken for various other purposes, and then people said, no more. That's as far as it goes, and we started adding bits back to it. So it's just it's a shout out to precious green spaces and heritage around the country.
Okay, Sean.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, I thought long and hard about this, and
now, is this your one or Lily's?
This is an ACT Party one, actually. So when I studied the Treaty of Waitangi in 1990, it was a special year as the 150th anniversary, so I spent a whole term studying it. And what I learnt is quite unrecognisable by some of the interpretations that are seen today. In fact, the Wellington City Council put on a day and a half of training about the treaty when I first got on the council, and I was surprised to find that it was very, very different, even different to what the Crown's official interpretation was. What we plan to do is fix what Geoffrey Palmer did in the 1980s, whereby he inserted into the legislation the idea of there being principles of the treaty without specifying exactly what they were, and that's led to a few court cases which have tried to figure out what Geoffrey was meaning by that, and one of those meanings was definitely that the Crown has the unfettered right to govern, but that's been forgotten about. The other one was that the fiduciary duties and the consultation rights were akin to a partnership, and that's taken on a whole new life of its own. So the ACT Party and myself as well would like to bring some clarity as to exactly what Parliament meant by that those terms. We say that the treaty is a fairly simple document, whether you call it the treaty or Titiriti, whether it's the English or the Māori version. The Crown was ceded sovereignty. The rights of rangatira and all people and their properties were protected by the Crown, and that we're all equal under the law with the same rights and obligations. So that's the members' bill that I'd like to submit, and then take that out to consultation, and then put it to referendum.
Okay, thank you for that, Sean. And for Barbara and Francis who aren't here, you can put your imagination on what their first private member's bill would be. Just put that to your imagination, what they could be. I don't know what they would choose, but they could choose anything. So we'll leave that to your imagination. Okay, so it looks like we will get ready. We're running a little bit ahead of time. So who's ready for an extended closing statement? Got radio silence there. Okay, let's kick off with Kush. What's your closing statement on why why the voters of Mana should give their electoral vote to you?
Thank you. So I'll just repeat few more things like protect and prosper has a multicultural focus. Everyone in our party will be treated equally and welcome no matter what race, religion, age or gender. At protect and prosper, everyone is treated with dignity and respect. I believe New Zealanders need a change. We are here to make a change. What has been done in the past 20 years by the ruling parties has not shown any positive results. And the country is now facing many crises. If I'm elected, I can make sure local issues are raised. Being a center-based party candidate, I will work on our party policies, which are based on common sense and become your voice in parliament. And I'm very thankful that it's in the Ballot team. They have provided us this wonderful opportunity to come on the stage and talk to everyone. Because the issue is like this, I'm just talking about all the small parties and new parties. We don't get any opportunities to come in the public. We don't have enough funding for giving regular advertisement in the newspapers. So all the media, we don't have press releases, small parties and new parties because we don't give them advertisement. So it is a very great effort that it's in the Ballot these people have done, because this can bring all the parties and everyone can hear small parties' views. So I would request everyone in the whole country to read all the policies of small parties, because small parties can make a change. And remember, these parties, big parties who have been in the power from last 20 years, if they would have performed, then we would not be discussing today that what are the issues. So please give us an opportunity. And I would highly highly advocate, please read small parties policies. And if you're happy, please give us a chance so we can make some positive changes. Thank you.
Okay, next up, Andy. Why should the Mana voters give you their electoral vote?
There's two things I'm going to talk about. The first one of them is what you do as an electorate MP. And one of the key things is you are there as a representative of the community. That means you're engaging with the community. You're there to help people, to help individuals with issues that they have, whether it's with central government. Sometimes you end up with ones with local government as well. And I've got a very, very long track record of doing exactly that. I work really, really well and really closely with all kinds of different people right across the community, and I love doing that. So I'd love to be your representative for Mana. The other part is being an MP is being part of a party in Parliament dealing with the big issues as well. And as I said earlier, I think our country is on the wrong track at the moment. I think politicians often say that this is a really, really important election, and I believe that this one really, truly is important. It's a landmark election. We can go one way or we can go the other. Clearly at the moment, the vast majority of New Zealanders are saying that we're going in the wrong direction. They're saying we're more divided than we were before, and they want to change. And so I think really from a New Zealand First point of view, the question is not that there is going to be change, because I believe that there will be, but it's going to be what is the change going to be too. And I think one of the beauties of MMP is that you have the intention of having more different voices in the room. Having more different voices in the room means you have a conversation about an issue. You don't have one party being able just to ram things through. And that's why I think it's important that we don't just have our lovely friends in the ACT Party here, Sean, and the National Party, but we also have New Zealand First there to try and keep the changed government to be a more centrist government, which is where I believe that most New Zealanders are. We don't want to be rocking backwards and forwards. We want some stability in some of those long-term policies, which is one of the box policies we didn't get to be asked. But there are many things which need some long-term stability. For example, how we deal with superannuation, how we deal with big infrastructure issues, how we deal with our education system. They can't be keeping on chopping and changing. And I believe that a centre party has a real unique position to be able to make sure that we do have that stability, because if we don't have that stability, we're not going to be able to move forward confidently and knowing where we're going. So I'd love your vote and party vote New Zealand First. Thank you.
Okay, Gina. Oh. Yes, I've turned my mic back on.
Kia ora, yeah, and thank you so much for the opportunity this evening. It's been really nice to both be here in person, but know that folks at home can see as well, and feels like the debate of the minor parties as well. Why I'm standing, the Greens have always been the party for me. Our commitment to making the lives of the marginalised better, honouring Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and years of leading the way on climate action is really why, and really I think the bulk of the Greens and our kaupapa. As people have said, this is an important election. I feel like everyone says that, but If we want to see, action on those key issues like growing wealth inequality, like the climate crisis, then we should be supporting a party that has those costed solutions, has those policy priorities, and has the people with that lived experience in the background and supporting that. So the time is now to party vote Green and also support us here in Mana as well.
Okay, and Sean, you've got the awkward role of why people should give the electoral vote to Lily.
Well, I'm a B part player here. Lily's so far much more elevated and enhanced within the party that she couldn't be here tonight, and so I got the privilege to come along and speak for her. And if she were here, you would be championing her as your electorate MP. But in reality, in all seriousness, it's not about who your electorate MP is. For the ACT party, we're really fishing for your party vote. I agree with Andy to a certain extent. I do think change is coming, and it is a question of what will that change look like. And I'll give you an example of how the two leading parties have played off each other and played us all for fools over the years. I was addressing an assembly at Scots during the week, Scots College, and I reminisced about the big issue when I was at their age, and it was about student fees and would they be brought in. And sure enough, the following year, Phil Goff brought them in, and Lockwood Smith, the national guy, said, "Oh, it's all terrible, we'll undo all this." But when they got elected, they didn't. They implemented it. And that's the sort of thing that you can often find when you swap from red to blue. And we're saying that if you like some of what I've been saying today about the cost of living and some of the issues that we're facing today, the clarification on the treaty, the intelligent debate, engagement, respectful across the aisle, all those sorts of things, then we seek your party vote for the ACT party. Is that the end of it? No. I just want to say, though, I got into politics when the government banned oil and gas exploration. That was my business. And the person that I hold responsible for that is Winston Peters from New Zealand First. He did it for his own self-purposes, to get waka-jumping legislation. I understand why the Greens did it. That was totally understandable and predictable. I understand why the Labour Party did it. Totally predictable and understandable, but not what New Zealand First do. I don't think they're a centre party at all. They're a Winston Peters party, and Winston will do what he wants. So if you want a real centre party, a Liberal party that doesn't have the hang-up of the Conservatives that the National Party has, if you want people like Brooke Van Velden leading you, young folks, David Seymour, and not really me, I suppose. It's the ACT party who are actually more centrist than the others. We're the ones that reach across the table and say, hey, here's some good policy. Can we get your buy-in? How can we cooperate and collaborate? So if you do want to keep the nets honest, if you want to rein them in, give us your party vote for the ACT party.
Okay. And now,
Seems a party.
let's give the impression of what Barbara and Francis will say on why they should get your electoral vote and your party vote. I think this will be a very quick summary, but at least you can sit there and say, in spirit, they are here. Crickets, I know. Okay, so just before we disappear, I'd like to introduce Alexander Garside, who will be joining me for many of our It's in the Ballot shows for 2023. We have shifted to a different style model, which sounds like the economies of scale, which I think might be approved by some of the parties here and their policies. On most of our shows, we'll be doing 2 shows per night in the same venue. We've worked out that for pack down and set up costs about the same amount of time. So, Alex, you're going to be our 4 p.m. host, I should say, and I'll be the 7 p.m. host.
Yep, no, it's looking like it's going to be a fun season.
I know. And the great part is we're traveling around the country. So this is our first It's in the Ballot show, but we have 23 confirmed in schedules and 4 in production and lining up the times to happen in here between Wellington and Auckland.
So see you out there.
Yeah. So for those who are probably wanting to know, next Tuesday, Women's Suffrage Day. We'll be having our shows there. However, we won't be presenting because it's a day of women having that. Now, just want to make sure I got this right. 130 years having the right to vote. I think it's 130
Yes.
years. Yeah, 150 years. So for Hut South 4 p.m. show will be hosted by Linda McGregor. You might remember her from a few of our shows back last year. And for our Remu Tucker Electorate show, we're going to be having, was it Angela McLeod? If you remember her, that she was one of the hopefuls running against Wayne Guppy in Upper Hutt. And Angela has been very helpful on one of the people who have joined the team to help make It's in the Ballot happen. Now, there's one thing we'd like to sit there and say here. We are a crowd-funded organisation, so appear on the right-hand side of your screen, left-hand side of the screen. We crowdfund to sit there and make these shows happen. So if you'd like to donate to one of our shows, feel free to go onto our website and deposit some money into bank account. You can also buy a koha ticket, which helps fund the venue costs, like that sort of thing there. Our team here are all volunteers. You've got on camera, you see Alex and I here, the candidates. Behind and Bede earlier on tonight. Behind the camera, you got was it Nick here, who's also doubling up as candidate liaison. We got Ray, who's on the computer this time round, which we'll be all doing a bit of musical chairs on there, and Stacey, if you remember, who was my fill-in last year, has taken on the role of becoming our producer, and is basically the person who gets to control everything, including the names that get to pop across the screen. So we will have that there. So yeah, it's going to go for a good old season, and yeah, we're going to be going to some interesting places: Whanganui, Palmerston North, New Plymouth, Rotorua, Cobanga, Hamilton, Cambridge. Getting up there. So yeah, anything you want to add?
Yeah, no. This is, yeah, if you want people's considered responses to questions they've had in advance and not off the cuff, then yeah, tune in.
Tune in. Okay, so we'll see. Well, it's a ballot. We'll see all you guys next Tuesday, 4 p.m. for the Hut South Electorate show. Let's have a good evening.